Hi guys. So this is a video about trauma and I guess the way that trauma kind of affects us, but also about diffusing kind of aggressive situations or getting our needs met. I mean, obviously we all have different forms of relationships in our lives, being friends, children, family, partners, co-workers, etc. So we have different needs that we need met in those types of relationships. Maybe from our partner we might need some kind of emotional support. Maybe from our boss we might need some consistency. Obviously it's very different for every individual. So I'm looking at kind of improving the relationship bonds and how to be assertive when we're triggered as well. Excuse me, and also our coping skills and attachment styles, and how that's affecting our relationships in our lives and things like that. So I've written down a bunch of information. I hope I can get through it without confusing people, but we'll see how we go. Okay, so firstly, 3 things in life for yourself, your kids, and everyone else. So consistency. Obviously consistency helps reduce the anxiety that's in ourselves and the way that we handle things, and actually promotes that different relationship with other people. They begin to trust you more, and maybe if they were trying to use you or take advantage, they might start to actually understand that you're very serious about this change. You're being very consistent. Even with discipline with children, we do an automatic kind of punishment, and that is consistent. Otherwise it creates that chaos in a child's mind. I'm not quite sure what's wrong, what's right, maybe I'm just a bad kid, so consistency. Reliability. Obviously being reliable does foster trust and connection and all of those wonderful things, but it also provides that safety for children. They know you're going to be reliable, or reduces resentment, disappointment, things like that in more intimate relationships or with friendships. And predictability. So predictability obviously is very similar to consistency in the sense of if you do this, I'm going to do this. So sometimes I talk about setting out rules and things like that when we're in a calm mindset for relationships that we have, open relationships where we can, discuss that predictability and what we might need from the other person to foster a better bonds and a better relationship in the end. So I've written down, try not to make rash decisions based on intuition or even your reaction to a behavior, situation, conversation, or action. So sometimes we just automatically respond with, our child might misbehave, we all automatically just go and smack them, instead of maybe looking at what's going on. Have we given them that attention? Are they hungry? What are the other factors? Especially if we're angry, we're more likely to act out in aggression or distancing behaviors. So sometimes it feels almost counterintuitive to go against your natural instincts, although our natural response to someone we feel is showing us disrespect or attacking us, so they might be aggressive, is obviously we are being attacked. And usually the standard responses to we are being attacked are either I must defend myself or I must retaliate and attack them back. And obviously both of those don't foster connection and better bonds and things like that, healthy relationships. They actually foster resentment. They are more likely to start a fight. They're more likely to end friendships or relationships than make them better. And it's not to say that we're wrong for behaving in that way. Obviously, when you act out in aggression, usually it's because you've been triggered. But I feel as though if we're more mindful of when we're triggered and the damage that it's creating to the relationship, even if we're being attacked first, depending on the relationship, if this is a consistent thing, really good idea to look at whether or not this person is a healthy relationship that you have in your life. The other idea is, though, you know, what's really happening. I have other videos on domestic violence, but you know, whether if somebody's just putting you down or whatever it is, and you feel like you have to say, actually, no, I am a really good person, you know, you need to see that I'm a good person because I did this and this and this. And they're going, okay, you know, so either I'm not getting from that person the reaction that I wanted, which is, you know, I am going to do this for you so that your needs are met, or maybe they're trying to manipulate you, you know, into it's a range of different things. People act in different ways for different reasons, but at the end of the day, people act in certain ways to get their needs met. So remember that there's a root cause. Whether or not they're being manipulative, whether or not they're being aggressive, there is something at the bottom of that. So what that person may want is some more connection, participation, excitement, mental stimulation, support, whatever it is. We need to match that emotion and that need and try and find out what it is, as opposed to reacting in defense or in attack, because we're not actually going to come to any conclusions, and it's really not going to make us feel good at night either, right? When we see outlandish behaviors, you know, or avoidant distancing behaviors, when someone just shuts the walls down and you can't get through, and then you feel like you've got to chase more, you know, you've got to really pursue that. Like, no, we need to communicate because we have to sort out this problem because that's our needs that we want to get met. We may not look past those behaviors, and that's what I was just saying. We need to address the root cause, whether if we want this person in our lives, for instance. So whatever behaviors we are displaying at any given moment are basically just where we are at in life at that moment. So we are doing the best that we can based on the skills and strategies that we've learnt up to that point in our life. Especially when we look at those with a background of trauma, for instance. You know, they may not have learnt survival skills that were healthy, so they might be triggered by a range of things, especially conflict situations. That's a big one there. So people might react impulsively as though they've been hurt, and it's important to remember that these are survival skills that have been learnt through a life of being unsafe. Often people who've experienced trauma in childhood can fall into the attachment styles of avoidant or anxious ambivalent. Okay, I'm just going to grab information here on that. Okay, so anxious attachment styles might come out in behaviors of being overly clingy, superficially compliant, so people pleasing. They might sell their souls for acceptance, so they want a feeling of belonging. They usually look for validation, so people saying, you're a really good person, you know. Openly destructive if told no. They have issues with rejection. Okay, ambivalent, openly angry and defiant, destructive, things, people, pets. Can't give and receive affection unless they want something. Dangerous, impulsive risk takers. Avoidant is isolated and usually doesn't care about other people's emotions or feelings. Feel omnipotent, over independent. Sullen, openly oppositional in a passive aggressive way. Disorganized is a variety of symptoms. Behavior is grossly disorganized, bizarre, and has features of the other three at various times, often for no apparent reason. So another one to look at for the anxious ambivalent is they have fears of abandonment. They're quick to anger. They can be like impulsive, what we were saying before. And with the avoidant, usually they're distrusting of others. They do tend to think that, you know, they're right and other people's feelings or concerns and things don't really matter, or maybe they're the problem, and they can be quite closed off. This is just a list of traits. It doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has them if they fall into those attachment styles. So those attachment styles, especially the behaviours that come out, can especially come out with stress and conflict. It can also come out especially in romantic relationships, because often people are vulnerable in romantic relationships and parenting. I mean, friendships it can as well, and work, things like that it can, but it's more likely to come out in relationships where you're vulnerable and you're likely to be triggered. And if you didn't have a good childhood, being a parent might be very difficult for you. So that's something to definitely look at. So people people with those styles of attachment in vulnerable relationships might display behaviours such as easily angered, which we referred to before, unstable emotions, so they might need some help with emotional regulation. They might be codependent. They might have rigid or porous boundaries, which are closed boundaries, obviously rigid. Porous is open boundaries, so they're, very, very loose. Very loose with their boundaries. They might become the rescuer, or they might be in the victim mindset, quite negative. The people-pleasing things come up again. They might have troubles with identity or purpose. They might have trouble trusting others or being too trusting. They might spend a lot of money or act in risky behaviours. And they actually do have a higher chance of falling into addiction or addictive behaviours. Also, people who've experienced trauma have a higher chance of developing anxiety disorders, depressive disorders, and personality disorders. When you look at mood disorders and things like that, usually somebody in the family has to have it, or there's a genetic kind of link. That's the word I'm looking for, genetic link. So, what can we do? So I've just got a list here. Well, firstly, we can reflect. I'm really not in the right trade of mind today. I keep messing up my words. It's a good thing I've got a list in front of me so I can read it wrong continuously. Firstly, we can reflect on our relationships, previous and current, and think on, firstly, the type of relationship that it was. So was it a healthy relationship? Was it an open relationship with communication, things like that? Was it a destructive relationship? Even if it's something that's quite neglectful, where the person doesn't give you the attention and that type of thing, that's still not healthy. It doesn't have to be violence, like as in physical violence, to be not healthy, So that's something to look at as well. Secondly, were their boundaries rigid or porous? So were they closed or open? Very open. And were yours? Now, thirdly, what type of attachment style were they? So think of your previous partners. Were they very open or closed, or were they probably in the middle where they're quite healthy attachment styles? And what about you? That's something to definitely think on. What about you? Because it does really factor in who you're more likely to find in life as well. Usually you'll find healthy attachment styles can go with either or. And when it comes to male and female, right, someone who has an anxious, ambivalent attachment style, if they're male, they're less likely to succeed with a woman who has an avoidant attachment style. The reason for that is that neediness and that kind of fear of abandonment and stuff like that can come across as a feminine trait, and someone who's avoidant is more of a male trait. So there are more men who possess the avoidant attachment style than there are, and more women possess the anxious ambivalent attachment style as well. So, which is better, I guess, because the other way doesn't work so well. So it's always, it's never easy you know, when we have triggers, but everybody has baggage, right? So next, please remember, someone's behavior is the loudest form of communication that they have. So like I said before, a behavior is not the problem. The problem is underneath. And if we care about this person, we want them in our lives, and we think that they have great values and things to offer to us, and vice versa, then we need to analyze, you know, what we can do in a way where we can actually have their needs met and our own. So we need to meet them with their emotion if it's safe to do so. If it's not, you need to remove yourself from the situation, and whether or not you choose to come back is obviously regarding the situation. Gosh, my throat's really playing up today. Although the last suggestion plays into that, so make rules for your fights. What we were saying before, you know, it's always a good thing to discuss when you're level, you know, what rules you're going to have, and make them quite like laws to yourself. You know, when you do this, I will do this, like that. So there's no, in the middle of an argument, there's no, why are you leaving? It's like, you know why I'm leaving. We've discussed this. I will see you, you know, in an hour or tomorrow or whichever it is. Or, you know, if the person comes home from work, they might voice to you, I'm actually in a really bad mood because I've had a really bad day. Can, you know, we not do too much tonight? Or can I have an hour to myself and speak to you once I've been able to reflect on that? And that's a really healthy and open way of avoiding fights. You know, prevention is obviously the best thing. And then obviously having rules to be safe while you're fighting, so you're not creating emotional damage to your relationship, or obviously physical damage, because nobody wants that. Okay, so what's the worst thing about fighting? Saying things you don't mean, creating damage to a relationship, creating resentment, that friend or partner potentially rejecting or ending the relationship, so rejecting you or ending the relationship. And obviously we don't want that. So what about, like I said before, if you do this, I'll do this. Like leave is obviously the best option. Leave the house for that moment when things are getting quite heated. Each couple will know where that line is. But if you do different ways of communicating, hopefully it won't get to that point. So learned behaviors can be unhealthy, obviously, like adult tantrums, for instance. I used to have them all the time. Sometimes I still have them, but they're not as bad because I try to use these techniques. So when children chuck tantrums, for instance, there's an automatic response, which is what we were talking about before. And this is something I do with my daughter. You know, I try to meet her emotions, and when she acts out in a really bad way, I try to always, you know, give that automatic response. I do initiate that type of communication first. Like, it's counterintuitive. It doesn't feel natural. Like, she'll say to me, "You're a terrible mother." And I want to be like, "Excuse me? Like, how dare you? You know, that's so inappropriate, and you're acting really badly," and those kinds of things, right? But I try not to. I try to say something like, "Have you had a bad day?" Because then you're not taking it on board, you're not making it your problem, and you're referring it back to the person, because hurt people, right? I mean, if you're upset, you're more likely to say something that is out of character or hurtful towards another person. So I already mentioned the mentioning when you get home, you know, I've had a bad day. Open communication is the best way to do things. And be specific with what you need. Be very specific. Like, you know, if you're lacking in connection, if you need more stimulation, then you might say to that person, "Look, I would really like it if once a week, you know, we could go out and we could do something exciting. We don't need to spend any money if we don't have money, you know. We can just do something together. I would like it." If the other person says no, then say, "Well, what would make you happy? You know, can we reach a compromise?" You know, there's always different ways to kind of address the actual need, as opposed to the feelings or behaviors that are coming out in that moment. So, yep, we talked about discuss things when you're calm, so the repercussions are minimal when things get heated. So instead of attacking in response to someone's behavior, we can respond with, you seem upset. It appears you are needing some more connection from me, but that behavior or way of communicating is only going to make me angry and fight with you, or defend myself and resent you. So I would love it if we could just be very specific with each other on what we are needing. So here we go. There's another list here of attachment styles. So secure, people are low on the avoidance side of things and anxiety. They're usually quite happy, empathetic and responsive, acceptable behaviors and accepting, and able to be vulnerable. Usually people with anxiety and things like that, and who have fearful or dismissive behaviors, can not be overly accepting or empathetic, or depending on which area that is. The dismissive is not overly empathetic, and they can be quite reactive as well, and have fears of being vulnerable. So high anxiety, low avoidance is called preoccupied. So they're overly concerned about others' thoughts and views. They can act out in clingy behaviors, seek validation and approval. A fearful attachment style is high anxiety, high avoidance. They can be dependent. They can see self as helpless. They want closeness, but they're scared of it. They expect to be hurt. And then you've got the dismissive behavior, which is low anxiety, high avoidance. They're very independent. They do not show emotions readily, and they have a high view of self and a low view of others. Then you go into the personality disorders. This is another good one to look at. So you've got histrionic personality disorder, which is behaviors of self-dramatization. They can be quite theatrical, easily influenced, shallow and liable, effectively attention-seeking, inappropriately seductive, preoccupied with physical attractiveness. Then you've got the narcissistic personality disorder. They are pervasive. They require grandiosity. They have a lack of empathy. They can be very sensitive, preoccupied with fantasies. They feel that they're special and unique, require excessive admiration. They have a sense of entitlement. They're interpersonally explorative, and they're envious of others. You've got borderline personality disorder. They're very impulsive, so they act without regard of consequences. Quarrelsome behavior. They have anger outbursts with inability to control, so they can't emotionally regulate. Inability to maintain actions, unstable and capricious mood, self-image, uncertainty, intense, unstable relationships, avoid abandonment, self-harm, and feelings of emptiness. And then you've got the antisocial personality disorder, which is they don't have concern. They don't have a high concern, for others' feelings. They're irresponsible, and they have a disregard for social norms, rules, and obligations. They have an incapacity to maintain enduring relationships. They have a low tolerance to frustration, aggression, and violence. They have an incapacity to experience guilt, and they are prone to blame others. Okie dokie. So the abandonment pattern, some of the sentences that might come out are, did I do something wrong? I didn't do something. I don't understand. I can't handle this. I cannot be alone. I just knew this would happen. So some tips here are step back, hold on, speak calmly, relax, reduce fear, and understand. I always say focus on the pause, because what we're experiencing is instinctive, unstoppable, natural, explainable, and very normal. And we need to get used to controlling these kinds of behaviors that are coming out in us, and foster really good bonds with the people in our lives, whether they be children, friends, family members, or partners, and just get the best selves out there. This week I've had a lot of pain in my back. I had a fall and I heard it last week, and then it was better, and then I had a fall at the community center, and I heard it again. So I've you know, been more likely to kind of lash out, but I've had a lot of support, and I've realized that we don't always need to react to the situations that we're feeling. We don't need to express our pain in the way of anger. You know, we can just be open about it and say, hey, I'm feeling a lot of pain right now. Do you think you could give me some space, or whatever it is? You know, it's really good to be open, especially when we're vulnerable, or especially when we're going through some pain. It may not always get responded to well, but at the same time, be mindful of that. Think of that. How many times have you been vulnerable, open, and quite healthy in the way that you've communicated to someone, and they've used it against you, or they've put you down for it? I mean, that's a sign of some toxic tendencies right there. Whether or not they're not happy with their own lives or whatever it is, there's no reason that you shouldn't protect yourself, and put some boundaries in place with those types of people. Okay, I think I'm probably going to go lay back down because I'm a bit sore now. Thank you guys so much for being here with me. And I got my hair done. A friend of mine did it for me. I'm so lucky that I have someone who can do it because I'm so poor. So I just try to appreciate the things that I have, right? And I want you guys to ask me any questions that you have on this, because I've been a bit wishy-washy today. All right, bye.